Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special edition of Ask the Migration Agent series. Today, we're going to cover a whirlwind of changes that have already occurred or have been announced for the skilled visa program, in particular, employer-sponsored visas. So we're going to get straight into it because we've got a lot of amazing questions, and we've got a little bit of a small presentation to get through as well. As we do, as usual, we do a little PowerPoint presentation on the changes, and then we get straight into your amazing questions. Here today as well with Maida, who's our customer service representative, and she'll also say a few words before we start proceedings about today's topic.
Okay, hi guys, nice to meet you and welcome for this webinar. So happy you attend this webinar. I'm going to make a summary about this company. We have experienced given different type of visas like sponsorship visas, COVID visas, partners visas, graduate visas, and all our visas were accepted. So we don't have exceptions. And happy with you guys that you can assist now. And so I want to introduce myself. I'm from Peru. Most of the people I've been talking with them today, and I'm a Spanish speaker. So sometimes I know that people doesn't speak well English, so you can talk to me in Spanish also as well. I can mention that if you want to call me by this number that I called you, you can send me a WhatsApp or text that I'm going to answer as well by this way. And we're going to continue with the webinar. And thank you so much.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Maida. So a little bit about myself. So I'm the founder and director of Equestria Immigration. Been registered since 2015. So just a little bit of a fun fact for yourselves. When you see a migration agent, depending on what number their agent MARA code starts with, that indicates when they were first registered. So if you've got someone with a 23 code, that means that they were registered in 2023. Someone with a 05 code, that means they were registered in 2005. And myself, 15 is the first two numbers. So that indicates that I've been registered for 8 years now. So hundreds of applications, from student visas to sponsorship visas, also partner visas, skilled visas, graduate visas. So nothing gives us more satisfaction than seeing international students complete that whole cycle. So from international students, sometimes from Holocaust, all the way to citizenship. And we've had many clients take that journey, and nothing gives us more satisfaction about that. Also a member of the Migration Institute of Australia since 2015. That's the peak body for professional migration agents in Australia, and qualified education agent. So when I started in this industry, I was an education agent, and then the natural progression was to register as a migration agent. Awesome. Let's see. So a little bit about today's agenda. So there's been a whirlwind of announcements, positive announcements for international students and prospective migrants in Australia. So we're going to look at the increased TISMIT, which is the threshold, the income threshold, the minimum income threshold for the TSS visa program. We'll also have a look at the expanded pathways for permanent residency, utilising the TSS visa program. We'll have a look at an interesting development, the aged care industry labour agreement, which could be a good option for many international students. So we'll have a good look at that. And we'll also conclude with general skilled migration, because a lot of questions were revolving around the GSM program. And we'll have a look at the state territory updates to date. All right, so the government has decided that from the 1st of July 2023, they're going to raise the minimum income threshold for any company who wants to sponsor an overseas employer. So it was 53,900 since about 2013. So there hasn't been any increases for over 10 years. And that's going to be increased to 70,000 as of the 1st of July 2023. So what does that mean? So after July 1, if your employer is wanting to sponsor you with the TSS visa program, then they're going to have to offer you a salary of at least 70,000. On top of that, I mean, depending on what your occupation is, it may need to be higher. So whichever is higher, the Australian salary market rate or the minimum threshold 70,000 per year plus superannuation will need to be your nominated salary. Nominations that are lodged before 1st of July 2023 are not impacted. So if we've lodged a couple of nominations today and they've been around 65,000, and that's not a problem. As long as you lodge any nomination prior to the 1st of July, you can still use the old rules. Another big change is that TSS visa holders will now have 6 months instead of 60 days to find a new employer. So when you're on a TSS visa and you're, for whatever reason, you cease employment with your sponsor, at the moment, you've got 60 days to find a new sponsor. But that's going to be extended out to 6 months. So no doubt another positive news for all involved. Now, I guess the really exciting news is the expanded pathways to permanent residence for the TSS visa program. So these are all official announcements that you can find on the Home Affairs website. So it's not rumours. We're not making it up. I mean, it's officially been announced by the Minister. So by the end of 2023, the temporary residence transition or TRT stream of the employer nomination scheme subclass 186 visa will be available for all TSS visa holders whose employers wish to sponsor them. So in effect, previously, you had to have an occupation on the medium-term list to have an access pathway to the 186 and permanent residency through the TRT stream. However, what the government has announced is that even short-term occupations will also have a pathway to permanent residency through employer sponsorship and an employer nomination in the 186 TRT stream. So what type of occupations are we talking about? And I know there's some marketing specialists amongst us, cooks, bakers, hairdressers, a whole host of occupations that are on the short-term stream. Also now will have an access pathway to permanent residency through the 186 TRT. So that's amazing news, massive news for employers. The problem was that if you're trying to attract people when they had a short-term occupation, it was a little bit difficult because there was no carrot at the end of permanent residency. But now with a permanent residency pathway, it's going to be beneficial, win-win situation for both the employer, because I'll be able to attract talent that they need, and also for the employee or the applicant who will have a solid pathway to permanent residency. So massive news. Another piece of amazing and exciting news is that eligibility for the TRT stream will be reduced from 3 years to 2 years. So previously, obviously, you had to have an occupation on the medium term, you'd have a visa duration of 4 years. Then after 3 years, you'd be able to apply for permanent residence. Now, you don't have to wait 3 years. You only have to wait 2 years to apply for permanent residency. Apart from also adding short-term occupations, they've reduced it by 1 year. So to wait for applying for permanent residency to be nominated and then apply for permanent residency. So again, amazing piece of information and news, very advantageous for everyone. In addition, on the back of allowing short-term occupation holders, TSS visa holders to apply for permanent residency, they've also taken away the limits on the number of short-term stream TSS visa applications you're allowed to make. Previously, it was capped to 2. This is a bit of a smokes and mirrors things anyway, because as soon as short-term occupation TSS visa holder fulfills their 2 years, they're going to apply for permanent residency anyway. So it doesn't really matter, but it's worth noting anyway. So that wraps up the TSS visa program changes. Like I said, all very positive and advantageous for prospective migrants, international students. So great piece of news there. Now, I also want to talk about the aged care industry labour agreement that was announced a couple of weeks ago. So what this in effect does, it allows Australian aged care providers to be able to access a new aged care industry labour agreement to sponsor overseas workers for the TSS subclass 482 visa in a direct care occupation. And what are some of the examples of direct care occupations? Nursing support worker, personal care assistant, and aged or disabled carer. Now, previously, these occupations weren't eligible for employer sponsorship, or the aged care provider would have to negotiate a labour agreement specifically for their business. But this is a blanket agreement for all aged care providers. And as you'll see in the next couple of slides, there's some really massive concessions. And the reality is that it's a good option. It's a very good option for everyone. So let's have a look at what the concessions are. So again, a 2-year pathway to permanent residence through the ENS scheme, streamlined visa nomination and priority visa application processing. So what that means is really quick turnaround from lodgement to approval. No post-qualification work experience required. So in the normal TSS visa program, you need to have a relevant qualification and 2 years work experience, generally speaking, should be post your qualification. However, with this aged care labour agreement, you don't need to have any work experience. So, I mean, how good is that? English language concessions for workers with relevant community language skills. So if you're working for an aged care facility that has primarily Spanish speakers, then the English level required would be lower than usual. And we'll have a look at that in the next slide. Well, I don't know if this is a good or bad thing, but the annual salary needs to be at least 51,222. Whereas for the normal TSS visa program, the minimum salary is 70,000. It depends on each individual person's circumstances, but yeah, I mean, it's a solid pathway to PR. That's the minimum salary. Maybe, you know, that makes it more attractive to employers. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a good thing, generally speaking. Now, what do you need? What are the requirements? So you need an AQF Certificate 3 in Aging Support or higher qualification. If you don't have a Cert 3, then you can also have 12 months of relevant work experience or part-time equivalent. You'll need a positive skills assessment from the Australian Nursing and Midwifery Accreditation Council, ANMAC, or the Australian Community Workers Association, ACWA, if you obtained your qualification overseas. But if you've got a Cert 3 from an Australian education provider or higher, then you don't need a skills assessment, right? Now, what are the English requirements? It's 5.0 or equivalent in each band. How we mentioned a little bit earlier, if it's a community centre or a certain community from a certain cultural or ethnic background, then the English requirement is IELTS 4.5 or equivalent. So some serious concessions there. Now, yeah, so I mean, the reason why I mentioned this pathway is because, you know, there could be people on a graduate visa or even a COVID visa, and they're a little bit stuck. And the important thing to note is with a COVID visa, for example, or a graduate visa, there's no study restrictions. So you can enroll in a Certificate 3 of Aging Support, which might be 12 months or 9 months duration. And as soon as you've got your completion letter, you're eligible to then be sponsored by an aged care facility with a pathway to permanent residency. I mean, so it's really massive. I mean, so, and yeah, if anyone is on a COVID visa or a graduate visa, can't find work in their nominated occupation, which is a requirement in many states to fulfill state requirements, then, you know, I implore you, organise a consultation with myself, and we'll provide you the details. You know, we've got a special offer of $50 for a limited time, and I can show you the pathway, and depending on your personal circumstances, how this can be achieved, even as a backup plan. Because our goal is to get you permanent residency one way or another. And, you know, you've got to be determined. Sometimes you've got to come out of your comfort zone and do something a bit left field. But if it gives you permanent residency, then once you're a permanent resident, you're a free agent and you can pursue any type of work you want, and you can revert back to your professional occupation that you have from Latin America or Europe or Asia. But yeah, so this is a really solid pathway and a very interesting development. But you need to know all the facts before you sort of dive into this pathway, but a very good pathway nonetheless. All right, so just some updates on GSM, General Skilled Migration Program, because I did notice that many of the questions today were related to the GSM program. However, the reality is that the nature of the updates were more concerned with employer-sponsored visas and expanded pathways to PR, the increase of the TISMET, and also the new labour agreement for aged care. So let's have a quick look at we'll go, as I like to call it, around the grounds. So the Australian Capital Territory have announced that they've got a next invitation round, which will be held before the 14th of July. So that's good. New South Wales state nomination program appears to remain open. Northern Territory, there is some new offshore GSM nomination criteria if you're offshore that you can have a look at. But the program also remains open for the time being. Queensland, the state nomination program is open, and they've also recently announced that registration for priority processing will open between Wednesday 14th of June and Sunday 18th of June. So the last chance in Queensland, if we've got anyone in the banana state. You will need to obviously satisfy or be able to fulfill state nomination requirements, and they also are requesting for decision-ready applications in order to be considered for priority processing. South Australia, I know we've got a lot of friends in South Australia. Their GSM program closed to new applications as of 8th of June 2023. So any applications that have commenced but not lodged before 8th of June 2023 will be deleted from their system. Existing applications that have been lodged before 8th of June will continue to be assessed. So if you lodged your application prior to that date, fingers crossed, you're still in consideration. And by all reports, Tasmania State Nomination Program appears to remain open as well. Victoria State Nomination Program is now closed to registrations of interest, so new ROIs. Submitted ROIs will continue to be assessed and selected for invitations to apply for Victoria visa nomination. So if you've got an ROI in play, fingers crossed, you still can be considered. If an ROI is withdrawn, applications will not be able to you won't be able to submit a new one until the 2023-2024 program opens. Hopefully the program reopens soon after the end of the financial year. I don't anticipate there will be many changes, and we'll cover, there's a few questions by participants regarding state territory nominations, so we'll cover that a little bit more detail in your Q&A. And state nomination program also appears to remain open in WA. All right, let's get cracking. Before we start the questions, I'm just going to highlight again. So after today's presentation, so after today's presentation, you will receive an email for a special offer for a limited time for all people who registered and participated in today's event. So we're offering a $50 consultation. You'll be able to book 3 different consultations. One concerns the COVID visa. So if your visa expires within 90 days, and this is my advice, I mean, you'd be best advised to secure a visa for the next 12 weeks at the 30th of June. So if your visa expires within 90 days, I would recommend booking a COVID visa consultation, and we'll send you the link for that, because even if you've got a positive assessment and an expression of interest in play, it's not a visa in any shape or form. If you want to maintain ongoing residence, then you need to have a visa to be able to remain in Australia. And obviously the COVID visa is a cost-effective visa for all concerned. So if you're working in Australia in your nominated occupation and or closely related occupation, or have a job offer, then I recommend you book the employer-sponsored visa consultation, because now that everyone's got a pathway to permanent residency and the minimum salary is actually 70,000 plus superannuation, I mean, I would be imploring you to jump on an employer-sponsored visa, because your clock starts ticking towards permanent residency. We can always pursue skilled migration in the background, and then whichever one happens first, because remember, skilled migration visa is an invitation visa. So you need to be invited to apply. You might receive an invitation in 1 month, in 3 months, in 6 months, in 9 months, maybe never. So, I mean, and it's always beneficial if you're on a sponsored visa, it's always beneficial for you also to receive an invitation, because if the government knows that an Australian company is prepared to sponsor you, then you know, it augurs well also for your skilled visa. So just keep that in mind. If you're not working in your nominated occupation, or you don't have a job offer or a closely related occupation, then sure, book a general skilled migration visa, and we can do some planning towards, you know, getting a positive assessment, lodging an expression of interest,